She walked into the most expensive hotel in America wearing a $2,000 coat. They treated her like she was nobody. 30 seconds later, the cleaning lady said 3 words in perfect Mandarin that made a room full of people freeze in absolute terror. This is the true story of how one conversation exposed a $50 million secret hiding in plain sight at Manhattan's most exclusive hotel. A secret so shocking that when it finally came to light, it didn't just go viral. It changed an entire industry forever. But here's what nobody expected. The most powerful person in that marble and gold lobby wasn't the tech billionaire with private jets. It wasn't the hotel manager with his Harvard MBA. It was the woman who paid minimum wage to empty trash cans. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about someone was completely, devastatingly wrong? Because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you see. Li Wei stepped out of her black Tesla Model S at exactly 9:47 p.m., her Hermes heels clicking against the sidewalk with the confidence of someone who'd built a tech empire from nothing. At 45, she commanded boardrooms in Shanghai, Singapore, and San Francisco. Her company's AI translation software was revolutionizing global business. Tonight, she was in New York to close a deal that would make her the richest woman in China. The Grandview Hotel's doorman barely glanced up from his phone. Li Wei paused at the entrance, adjusting the jade bracelet her grandmother had given her for protection. She'd stayed at this hotel 12 times over the past 3 years. The staff had never once remembered her name. Inside, the lobby buzzed with its usual theater of wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over clusters of designer luggage and hushed conversations in multiple currencies. Li Wei approached the front desk, where 3 staff members were deep in animated discussion about weekend plans. She waited and waited. The woman behind the marble counter finally looked up, her smile freezing when she took in Li Wei's appearance. "Can I help you?" "I have a reservation. Li Wei. Presidential suite." The woman's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "Could you spell that? And do you have identification? Also, how will you be paying tonight?" "She." Li Wei had stayed in 5-star hotels across 4 continents. She knew the sound of skepticism wrapped in politeness. Her credit card hit the marble counter with a sharp click. Black American Express, no spending limit. The whispered conference between the 3 staff members wasn't as quiet as they thought. "Are we sure about this? Maybe we should call the manager? Does she even speak English?" 20 feet away, Keisha Williams pushed her cleaning cart past the concierge desk, her movements automatic after 2 years of night shifts. But her eyes missed nothing. She'd watched this scene play out before. Different faces, same script. The way wealth was questioned when it didn't arrive in the package they expected. Keisha had a choice to make. Keisha straightened her shoulders and walked toward the front desk, her cleaning cart wheels squeaking softly against the marble floor. The sound made all 3 staff members look up. Protocol dictated that custodial staff remain invisible during guest interactions. "Excuse me," Keisha said quietly, her voice cutting through the whispered doubts. "I couldn't help but notice." Then she switched languages. "您好，李女士，欢迎回到格兰的维友酒店。很抱歉让您等待了." The lobby fell silent. Not the gentle quiet of expensive discretion, but the absolute stillness of a record player suddenly unplugged. The woman behind the front desk blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what she'd just heard. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without sound. Li Wei's expression shifted from controlled frustration to genuine surprise, then melted into something that looked like relief mixed with disbelief. She responded in rapid Mandarin, her words flowing like water finding its natural course. "I can't believe this. Finally, someone who understands. Do you know how exhausting it is to be treated like you don't belong in places you could buy 10 times over?" Keisha nodded, switching effortlessly back to Mandarin. "I've watched it happen too many times. You deserve better than questions about whether you can afford a room you've probably stayed in before." The front desk staff stood frozen, 3 statues in matching burgundy uniforms. Other guests in the lobby had stopped their conversations, heads turning toward the unprecedented scene of the hotel's cleaning woman conducting fluent business in a language none of them recognized. Li Wei's voice carried a note of amazement. "Your pronunciation is flawless. Where did you learn to speak like this?" Community college started it, then language exchange apps, online courses, practice with international students. Mandarin was actually my 3rd language after Spanish and Arabic. Keisha's response was matter-of-fact, as if collecting languages was as normal as collecting stamps. The sound of expensive heels clicking rapidly across marble announced the arrival of David Chen, assistant manager, drawn by the commotion. He'd been trained to intervene when situations deviated from script. But as he approached, he heard something that made him slow his steps. His own heritage meant he understood every word of the conversation happening in front of him. The cleaning woman wasn't just speaking Mandarin. She was using formal business terminology, cultural honorifics, the kind of linguistic sophistication that required years of serious study. Li Wei had switched to testing mode, throwing complex business concepts at Keisha in rapid-fire Mandarin. Market volatility, regulatory compliance, cross-cultural communication barriers in international partnerships. Keisha didn't miss a beat. More than that, she was adding insights, speaking about the challenges of East-West business relationships with the fluency of someone who'd lived them, discussing cultural nuances that even native speakers sometimes missed. The lobby had become an amphitheater. Guests who moments before had been absorbed in their own conversations now formed a loose semicircle around the front desk. Some were filming with their phones, others just stared, trying to process the reality unfolding before them. "Miss Williams," David's voice carried a warning note as he reached the desk. "Perhaps you should return to your duties." Li Wei turned toward him, her eyes sharp. "Actually, she's been more helpful in the past 5 minutes than your entire front desk staff has been in the past 20. David found himself caught between professional protocol and undeniable evidence. The woman in the cleaning uniform had just demonstrated linguistic abilities that could solve problems his hotel faced daily. International guests struggling with communication, cultural misunderstandings that led to bad reviews, lost revenue from guests who felt unwelcome. "We have policies about staff interactions," he managed. "Then maybe," Li Wei said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms, "your policies need to change." Keisha stepped back slightly, suddenly aware of how far she'd strayed from her invisible role. The cleaning cart seemed to mock her now, spray bottles and paper towels beside a demonstration of skills worth more than her annual salary. But Li Wei wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Keisha's hand. "We need to talk, not here, not now, but soon." The card was heavy stock, embossed lettering. Even touching it felt like crossing into a different world. 2 hours later, Keisha sat in the hotel's empty break room, staring at the business card like it might disappear. Li Wei, CEO, Phoenix Technologies. The kind of card that opened doors she'd only dreamed of walking through. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Child, language is power. Learn enough tongues, and the world can't keep secrets from you." Keisha had been 8 when her family moved to Brooklyn from Kingston. Her mother worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, childcare during the day, weekend shifts at a laundromat. Her father had stayed behind in Jamaica, promising to follow once they got established. That was 20 years ago. The language learning started by accident. Their apartment building was a United Nations in miniature. Spanish from the Gonzalez family downstairs, Arabic from the elderly man who fixed bicycles in the courtyard, Mandarin from the restaurant owners who sometimes gave her grandmother free soup bones. While other kids played video games, Keisha collected words like, some kids collected baseball cards. She'd sit in the laundromat practicing pronunciation with whoever would listen. Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaner taught her proper tones. Ahmed from the corner store corrected her Arabic grammar over free candy bars. Community college was supposed to be her launching pad. International business degree, maybe work at the UN as a translator. But when her mother got sick during Keisha's sophomore year, someone had to pay the bills. The hotel job was temporary, just until things got stable. That was 2 years ago. Every night she'd come home to her studio apartment and open language apps on her cracked phone screen. Duolingo streaks longer than some people's relationships. YouTube videos of Beijing business meetings playing while she ironed uniforms. French news podcasts during her commute. Her coworkers thought she was crazy. Why are you learning all that stuff? You're going to be cleaning toilets forever anyway. But Keisha knew something they didn't. Every conversation was practice. Every international guest was a masterclass. She'd built a language portfolio worth 6 figures while earning minimum wage. The business card felt heavy in her pocket as she clocked out at 6 a.m. Li Wei had written something on the back in perfect English. Talent recognizes talent. Call me. For the first time in 2 years, Keisha felt like someone had finally seen her. 3 days later, chaos erupted in the lobby at exactly 2:17 p.m. The Beijing International Investment Group had arrived 6 hours early for their conference, and nobody was prepared. 8 executives in identical black suits stood near the entrance, speaking rapid Mandarin while checking expensive watches. Their body language screamed frustration mixed with jet lag. David Chen emerged from the back office, his face flushed with panic. The hotel's usual translator was stuck in traffic from JFK. The backup translator was at another job. The translation app on his phone kept freezing. "We need someone who speaks Mandarin," he muttered to himself, running his hands through his hair. "We need them now." Li Wei watched the disaster unfold from her usual corner table in the lobby cafe. She'd been staying an extra week, claiming business meetings but really watching to see how the hotel would handle its next linguistic crisis. She wasn't disappointed. The lead executive, Mr. Zhang, was growing increasingly agitated. His voice carried across the marble floors as he spoke to his team. "This is exactly the kind of unprofessional service we were warned about. Maybe we should reconsider the partnership." David's phone rang. His boss, demanding to know why 8 potential investors were standing in the lobby looking annoyed. "Fix this," came the terse instruction. "The conference contract is worth $2 million. That's when David remembered the cleaning woman who'd spoken perfect Mandarin 3 nights ago. He found Keisha in the 3rd-floor supply closet, restocking towels. "Miss Williams, I need your help." "If this is about the incident the other night, I can explain." "No, not that. Well, yes, that. But we need you right now. There are Chinese executives downstairs, and we have no translator." Keisha set down the towels slowly. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the thought, but I can't just leave my duties. And I'm not dressed for—" "I'll handle your supervisor. Please, you'd be saving our jobs." 20 minutes later, Keisha stood in the lobby wearing a borrowed blazer over her uniform, her hands slightly trembling as she approached the group of executives. Mr. Zhang looked up with barely concealed irritation. "Xian Shengmen, Xia Wu Hao," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "我是酒店的文化联络员，非常抱歉让您们久等了." The transformation was immediate. Mr. Zhang's expression shifted from annoyance to surprise, then professional interest. "Finally, someone who understands proper protocol," he replied in Mandarin. "We've been standing here like tourists." What followed was a masterclass in cultural navigation. Keisha didn't just translate. She anticipated needs. When Mr. Zhang mentioned dietary restrictions, she knew which restaurants in the city could accommodate. When they discussed business customs, she bridged American and Chinese expectations seamlessly. "Your Mandarin is excellent," Mr. Zhang observed. "Where did you study?" "I'm self-taught, sir. Languages have always been my passion." "Self-taught?" Mr. Zhang turned to his colleagues, switching to rapid business dialect. "Did you hear that? This woman taught herself to speak like this." For the next hour, Keisha facilitated conversations about investment portfolios, market analysis, and cultural sensitivity in international business. She found herself not just translating words, but translating worlds. When Li Wei approached the group, Keisha felt a moment of recognition pass between them. Li Wei introduced herself in English, then switched to Mandarin to praise Keisha's professionalism to the executives. "This young woman," Li Wei told Mr. Zhang, "understands business better than most MBA graduates I've worked with." As the executives headed to their rooms, Mr. Zhang pressed his business card into Keisha's hand. "We will be doing business in New York for the next 6 months. We would like to request your services specifically." David watched from across the lobby, his phone already ringing with congratulations from his supervisor. The emergency meeting was called for 8 a.m. the next morning. Margaret Thornfield sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, her silver hair pulled into its usual severe bun, reading glasses perched on her nose as she flipped through Keisha's personnel file. 15 years as Director of Human Resources had taught her to spot problems before they became disasters. "This," she said, tapping the file with her pen, "is exactly the kind of situation that keeps me awake at night." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Around the table sat the hotel's senior management team: Operations Manager Patricia Wells, Guest Services Director Robert Manning, and General Manager James Crawford. The smell of expensive coffee couldn't mask the tension in the room. "Yesterday's incident with the Chinese delegation was handled," Margaret continued, "but it was handled wrong. We have policies for a reason. Protocols exist to protect this hotel from liability." "But she saved a $2 million contract," David interjected. "The executives specifically requested—" "She's a custodial worker." Margaret's voice cut through his protest like ice. "She has no training in guest relations, no background checks for client interaction, no insurance coverage for translation services. What if she'd made a cultural mistake? What if she'd mistranslated something critical?" Patricia Wells nodded vigorously. "Imagine if word got out that we're using our cleaning staff as interpreters. What does that say about our professional standards?" Robert Manning leaned forward, his face flushed. "My front desk staff have been with this hotel for years. They've undergone extensive training. Are we really going to let some maid make them look incompetent?" The word hung in the air like smoke. James Crawford, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. "The guest satisfaction scores from yesterday were the highest we've seen all quarter. The Chinese delegation specifically praised our cultural sensitivity." "That's not the point," Margaret snapped. "This is about maintaining proper boundaries. We can't have employees thinking they can just step outside their designated roles whenever they feel like it." David could feel his carefully built career teetering on the edge. "What if we made it official, created a cultural liaison position?" "With what budget?" Patricia demanded. "We'd have to restructure her entire employment classification, benefits, insurance, training programs, the union implications alone." "Plus," Robert added, "what precedent does this set? Every housekeeper and maintenance worker thinks they can waltz into guest areas and play expert." Margaret closed the file with a sharp snap. "Here's what's going to happen. Miss Williams will receive a formal written warning about overstepping her role. She may assist with translation services on an emergency basis only, with prior management approval, wearing appropriate attire. No additional compensation, no title change, no deviation from her primary custodial duties." "That seems," David started. "Fair," Margaret finished. "She keeps her job, which is more generous than most hotels would offer after such a breach of protocol." James Crawford's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. "I just received an email from Mr. Zhang's assistant. They're requesting Miss Williams specifically for their entire 6-month project. They're willing to pay a premium for her services." The room fell silent. "How much of a premium?" Patricia asked quietly. $50,000 for translation and cultural consulting." Margaret's pen clicked rapidly against the table. "Well, that changes things slightly." "Only slightly?" David couldn't hide his disbelief. She's still a custodial worker, Margaret said firmly. We'll allow her to assist on a case-by-case basis, but she reports to housekeeping. She follows housekeeping schedules. And any problems, any complaints, any issues whatsoever, this program ends immediately. Outside the conference room, Keisha mopped the hallway floors, listening to every word through the thin walls. She understood exactly what they thought of her. Over the next 3 weeks, something extraordinary began to happen at the Grandview Hotel. It started small. A Spanish diplomat's wife, lost and frustrated in the lobby, speaking rapid Catalan to anyone who would listen. The front desk staff exchanged helpless glances until Keisha appeared, switching effortlessly between Spanish and Catalan to help locate the woman's missing luggage. Then came the Arabic Business Consortium from Dubai, their interpreter delayed by a snowstorm. Keisha spent 4 hours facilitating negotiations for a $3 million real estate deal, her formal Arabic impressing even the most skeptical executives. By week 3, international guests were specifically asking for the translator who works here. The numbers didn't lie. Guest satisfaction scores had jumped 23% in the international category. Return bookings from Asian markets increased by 40%. The hotel's Yelp reviews suddenly featured phrases like exceptional cultural understanding and made us feel truly welcome. Li Wei watched it all from her extended stay in the presidential suite. She'd canceled her flight back to Shanghai twice, claiming ongoing business negotiations while really documenting the transformation happening before her eyes. On a Tuesday morning, she found Keisha in the lobby at 6 a.m., explaining subway directions to a confused French family while simultaneously checking them out in flawless French. "Comment puis-je vous aider avec vos bagages?" Keisha asked, already motioning to a bellhop. The family's relief was palpable. The father pressed a $20 tip into Keisha's hand, the first tip she'd ever received for her linguistic skills. "Merci beaucoup. You saved our entire trip." Li Wei approached as the family departed. "That was beautiful to watch." Keisha looked down at the $20 bill, still processing the moment. "They thanked me like I'd done something extraordinary, but I was just talking." "You were building bridges," Li Wei corrected. "Do you realize what you've created here?" The evidence was everywhere. The Arabic businessman who'd extended his stay specifically to work with Keisha on cultural training for his American partners. The Japanese family who'd switched their corporate bookings from the Ritz-Carlton after experiencing what they called genuine hospitality that understands our heart. But perhaps most telling was the change in the hotel staff themselves. David Chen had started asking Keisha to teach basic Mandarin phrases to the front desk team. Just enough to show respect, he'd explained, but Keisha could see the deeper shift. They were beginning to understand that language wasn't just about words, it was about dignity. Even some of the more skeptical employees were coming around. Patricia Wells, who'd been openly hostile during the management meeting, had quietly asked Keisha to help her communicate with the Portuguese housekeeping staff. "I never realized how much I was missing," Patricia admitted during their first lesson. "They've been trying to tell me important things about the guests, but I kept dismissing them because of the language barrier." The ripple effects extended beyond the hotel walls. Word was spreading through Manhattan's luxury hospitality network. Other hotels were calling, asking about the Grandview's Cultural Competency Program. Industry blogs were writing articles about innovative approaches to international guest services. Li Wei kept detailed notes. Revenue increases, staff morale improvements, guest loyalty metrics, all pointing to one undeniable conclusion. Keisha wasn't just solving individual communication problems, she was transforming an entire business model. But the most powerful moment came on a Friday evening. Keisha was helping an elderly Chinese grandmother navigate the Medicare system over the phone, switching between Mandarin dialects to match the woman's regional accent. "Nai, don't worry," Keisha said gently. "I'll stay on the phone until we figure this out." Li Wei watched from across the lobby, seeing not just linguistic skill, but profound compassion in action. This wasn't about business metrics or profit margins. This was about human connection transcending every barrier society had built. The $20 tip had grown into something worth far more than money. The invitation came on expensive letterhead, delivered by hand to Keisha's studio apartment at 7 p.m. on a Thursday. Phoenix Technologies cordially invites you to discuss a business proposition that could change your life. Li Wei had arranged to meet at a small cafe in Soho, away from the hotel's watchful eyes. When Keisha arrived, she found Li Wei sitting at a corner table with her laptop open, surrounded by documents that looked suspiciously like contracts. "Thank you for coming," Li Wei said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I've been watching what you've accomplished at the hotel. It's time we talked about your future." Keisha sat carefully, her cleaning uniform feeling suddenly out of place among the cafe's artisanal coffee and venture capitalist conversations. "Miss Lee, I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not sure." "Phoenix Technologies is expanding into the American market," Li Wei interrupted gently. "We need someone who understands both Eastern and Western business cultures. Someone who can navigate complex international relationships. Someone exactly like you." She slid a document across the table. The number at the bottom made Keisha's breath catch. $75,000 annually plus benefits as our Director of Cultural Relations and International Business Development, based in our San Francisco office. Keisha stared at the paper, the numbers blurring slightly. It was more money than her mother had made in her best year, even working 3 jobs. "I don't understand. You barely know me. This is too much." Li Wei smiled. "I know you taught yourself 5 languages while working minimum wage. I know you handle $1 million negotiations with grace under pressure. I know you see people as human beings first, regardless of their background. These aren't skills you can teach in business school." The offer was everything Keisha had dreamed of, but the reality felt overwhelming. "San Francisco is 3,000 miles away. My family, my mother. We can arrange relocation assistance. Health insurance that would cover your mother's medical needs. Educational benefits if you want to finish your degree." Keisha's hands trembled slightly as she held the contract. "What if I'm not ready? What if I fail?" "Then you'll fail at something worth failing at," Li Wei said quietly. "Do you know what I was doing at your age? Cleaning offices in Beijing while building my first startup in a shared apartment with 6 roommates. The difference between us and them," she gestured toward the hotel district, "isn't talent or intelligence. It's an opportunity." The weight of possibilities settled over them. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a bridge between worlds. "There's one condition," Li Wei continued. "I want you to start as a consultant while you transition. Keep your hotel job for now. Let's test how Phoenix's clients respond to your cultural expertise. If it works, we will make it permanent." Keisha looked up from the contract. "And if it doesn't work?" "It will." Li Wei's confidence was absolute. "I've spent 20 years building international business relationships. I know talent when I see it. More importantly, I know potential when others refuse to recognize it." Outside the cafe windows, Manhattan's lights glittered like promises. For the first time in her life, Keisha felt like she was being offered a seat at the table instead of just cleaning it. "When would you need an answer?" Li Wei smiled. "Take all the time you need. Opportunities like this don't expire, they evolve." 3 nights later, Keisha found herself in the hotel's empty break room at 3 a.m., staring at Li Wei's contract spread across the scratched table. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows over dreams written in legal language. She wasn't alone. Li Wei sat across from her, having arrived quietly with 2 cups of tea from the 24-hour deli down the street. Neither woman spoke for several minutes, the weight of decision hanging between them like morning fog. "I keep thinking about my grandmother," Keisha finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She used to tell me that language was the key to any door I wanted to open. But what if I'm not brave enough to use the key?" Li Wei set down her tea, her own hands showing the slight tremor that comes with vulnerability. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Keisha nodded. When I was 25, I had the chance to pitch my startup to American investors. I was so terrified of my accent, of being judged, that I hired an American actor to present for me. Li Wei's laugh was bitter. I sat in the back of the room watching someone else take credit for my life's work because I didn't believe my voice was worth hearing. The admission hung in the air like a confession. I lost that deal. Not because my idea wasn't good enough, but because I wasn't brave enough to be myself. It took me 10 more years to rebuild that confidence. Li Wei reached across the table, her fingers finding the jade bracelet on her wrist. This bracelet belonged to my grandmother, too. She gave it to me the day I left China, and she said something I'll never forget. Keisha leaned forward. She said, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and choosing to honor your ancestors' dreams anyway." With deliberate slowness, Li Wei unfastened the bracelet. The jade caught the fluorescent light, seeming to glow with its own inner warmth. "I want you to have this. Not as payment, not as obligation, but as a reminder that you're not just carrying your own dreams. You're carrying the dreams of every woman who cleaned floors and dreamed of boardrooms, every immigrant who learned a new language hoping for a new life." Keisha's eyes filled with tears as Li Wei placed the bracelet in her palm. The jade was warm, as if it held decades of hope and determination. "I'm scared," Keisha whispered. "Good," Li Wei replied, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "That means it matters. The dreams that don't scare us aren't big enough." In that fluorescent-lit break room, surrounded by the smell of industrial cleaning supplies and stale coffee, two women from different worlds found the same truth. Courage is contagious, and sometimes it takes a stranger to see what we're too afraid to see ourselves. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, jolting Keisha awake in her studio apartment. "Miss Williams, we have a situation." David's voice carried a panic she'd never heard before. "The International Luxury Hospitality Summit starts in 4 hours. 200 executives from 15 countries. Our primary interpreter just called in sick with food poisoning, and our backup is stuck in Chicago because of flight cancellations." Keisha sat up, her mind instantly alert. "What do you need?" "Everything. Simultaneous interpretation for keynote speeches, breakout sessions in 6 languages, cultural protocol management. The hotel's reputation is on the line. If this summit fails, we lose our international conference business permanently." The jade bracelet caught the morning light from her nightstand, and she could almost hear Li Wei's voice. "The dreams that don't scare us aren't big enough." 2 hours later, Keisha stood in the hotel's grand ballroom, watching the setup for what would either be her greatest triumph or most spectacular failure. The space buzzed with controlled chaos. Technicians testing microphone systems, caterers arranging international cuisine according to strict cultural requirements, and 200 of the hospitality industry's most powerful executives beginning to arrive. She'd borrowed a professional blazer from Li Wei, who'd insisted on attending the summit as a silent observer. Her cleaning uniform was folded neatly in her locker upstairs, a reminder of how far she'd traveled in just 4 weeks. Margaret Thornfield approached, her expression a mixture of desperation and skepticism. "Miss Williams, I want to be absolutely clear about the stakes here. One mistake, one cultural misunderstanding, one mistranslation, and this hotel's international reputation is finished." "I understand," Keisha replied, her voice steadier than her racing heart. The morning began with the Japanese delegation. 12 executives from Tokyo's most exclusive hotel chain. Their presentation covered advanced hospitality technology, delivered in rapid business Japanese peppered with technical terminology. Keisha closed her eyes briefly, centering herself in the language patterns she'd absorbed through countless hours of anime, business podcasts, and late-night study sessions. "Ohayo gozaimasu, minasama," she began, her voice carrying through the ballroom's sound system. "Let me translate the innovative technological solutions being presented. For 20 minutes, she became a bridge between worlds, not just translating words, but translating concepts, cultural contexts, and business philosophies. When the lead executive mentioned omotenashi, the Japanese art of anticipating guests' needs, she explained not just the definition, but the cultural heart behind it. The applause was immediate and genuine, but the real test came next. The Arabic Business Consortium from Dubai had arrived to discuss a $50 million investment in sustainable luxury tourism. Their presentation was delivered in formal Arabic, but their questions came in 3 different dialects: Lebanese, Egyptian, and Gulf Arabic. Keisha had studied formal Arabic, but dialects were living languages that changed like shifting sand. She felt a moment of panic as the first regional accent hit her ears. Then she remembered Ahmed from the corner store, correcting her grammar over candy bars. Mrs. Hassan from the laundromat, teaching her Lebanese phrases while folding sheets. The elderly Moroccan man who'd taught her proper pronunciation in exchange for helping him navigate Medicare forms. Every conversation had been practiced for this moment. She switched between dialects mid-sentence, matching each speaker's regional patterns, drawing on years of accumulated knowledge from Brooklyn's immigrant communities. When one executive used an expression she didn't recognize, she asked for clarification in perfect Arabic, turning her uncertainty into cultural curiosity rather than professional weakness. "This woman," the lead investor announced to the room, "understands business Arabic better than some of my own staff." By lunch, word was spreading through the conference. "Who is this translator? Where did they find her? Can we book her for our Tokyo conference?" But the ultimate test was yet to come. At 2 p.m., the equipment failed. Every piece of translation technology in the ballroom went dead simultaneously. Microphones, headsets, digital displays. The technical crew estimated a 2-hour repair time minimum. 200 executives sat in growing confusion as presentations ground to a halt. Multiple languages filled the air as attendees tried to communicate across cultural and linguistic barriers. The carefully orchestrated summit was collapsing into chaos. Margaret Thornfield looked like she might faint. David was frantically making phone calls to backup technicians. James Crawford, the general manager, stood frozen as his career flashed before his eyes. That's when Li Wei stood up from her table at the back of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced in clear English, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded boardrooms across 4 continents. "I'd like to introduce Keisha Williams, who will be providing interpretation services without technological assistance." Keisha felt every eye in the room turn toward her. 200 of the world's most successful hospitality executives waiting to see if a former cleaning woman could save their summit. She walked to the center of the ballroom, positioning herself where every table could see her. "Bonjour, guten tag, konnichiwa, marhaban, hola, buenos dias," she began, greeting the room in 6 languages. "We're going to continue this summit the way business was conducted for thousands of years, through human connection." What followed was 45 minutes of linguistic virtuosity that would be talked about in hospitality circles for years to come. French hoteliers discussing sustainable practices, Keisha translated their passion for environmental stewardship into concepts that resonated with executives from Japan, where harmony with nature is foundational to business philosophy. German efficiency experts explaining operational optimization, she transformed their technical precision into Arabic business poetry that made the Dubai investors lean forward with interest. Chinese executives presenting market expansion strategies, she bridged their concepts with Spanish colonial hospitality traditions, helping Mexican resort owners see new possibilities for Asian partnerships. She wasn't just translating languages, she was translating cultures, finding the common human threads that connected different approaches to hospitality. When she explained the Japanese concept of omotenashi to the Arabic speakers by comparing it to karam, the sacred duty of hospitality, the room erupted in understanding. When she helped the French delegation understand Chinese guangxi by relating it to French salon culture, she created connections that transcended business cards. The final moment came when Chang Wei, Li Wei's former business partner and now CEO of Asia's largest hotel conglomerate, stood up from his table. "In 30 years of international business," he announced to the room, "I have never seen cultural bridge building of this caliber. Miss Williams, my company would like to offer you a consulting contract for our global expansion." The standing ovation began with the Japanese delegation and spread like wildfire through the ballroom. 200 executives rose to their feet, applauding not just her linguistic skills, but her ability to make them all feel seen, understood, and connected. Li Wei watched from the back of the room, tears streaming down her face, as the woman she'd first seen emptying trash cans received recognition from the world's hospitality elite. 6 weeks later, Keisha stood in the same grand ballroom where her life had changed forever. But this time, she wasn't wearing a borrowed blazer over a cleaning uniform. She wore a tailored business suit, her first professional wardrobe purchase, and around her wrist, Li Wei's jade bracelet caught the light from the crystal chandeliers. The International Hospitality Association's annual awards ceremony had never before honored a custodial worker. Tonight, that history was being rewritten. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice echoed through the ballroom, "this year's Excellence in Cultural Innovation Award goes to Keisha Williams for her groundbreaking work in international hospitality relations." The applause began before she reached the stage. But as she walked down the aisle between tables filled with industry leaders, she noticed something extraordinary happening. The hotel's cleaning staff, her former colleagues, had been invited to attend. Maria from housekeeping, wearing her best dress. James from maintenance, uncomfortable in a borrowed tie but beaming with pride. They stood and applauded as she passed, their faces reflecting a truth she was only beginning to understand. Her success was their vindication, too. At the podium, Keisha looked out over an audience that 3 months ago wouldn't have seen her as anything more than background scenery. Now they hung on her every word. "3 months ago, I was invisible in this room," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Not because I wasn't here, but because assumptions about worth are so deeply embedded that we stop seeing people as human beings with infinite potential." She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. "Tonight, I want to talk about the hidden talents walking among us every day. The security guard who speaks 4 languages. The housekeeper who was a teacher in her home country. The kitchen worker who has an engineering degree but couldn't get it recognized here. The camera crews from Hospitality Today and Global Business Network captured every moment. But this wasn't just about media coverage. Word was already spreading through social media. Had Hidden Talent was trending on Twitter. LinkedIn was buzzing with stories of underestimated employees. The ripple effect was going global in real time. But the most powerful moment came when Margaret Thornfield took the stage. The same woman who'd called an emergency meeting to contain the custodial worker problem now stood before the industry's elite with a completely different message. "As Director of Human Resources at the Grandview Hotel," Margaret began, her voice carrying a humility that surprised everyone who knew her, "I want to publicly acknowledge a failure of leadership that nearly cost us the most valuable employee we've ever had." The ballroom fell silent. "We created systems that valued credentials over capability, titles over talent, assumptions over achievement. We nearly missed a transformational opportunity because we confused job descriptions with human worth." Margaret turned toward Keisha. "Tonight, I'm announcing the Grandview Hotel's new Hidden Talent initiative. We will actively seek employees whose abilities extend beyond their current roles. We will create pathways for advancement based on merit, not just traditional qualifications, and we will never again allow institutional blindness to waste human potential." The applause was thunderous, but it was nothing compared to what happened next. Li Wei stepped forward with a microphone, but before she could speak, Chang Wei, her former partner and now one of Asia's most powerful hospitality executives, joined her on stage. "Phoenix Technologies and Chang International Hotels are announcing a joint venture," Li Wei said, her voice filled with emotion. the Global Cultural Bridge Program, with Keisha Williams as our inaugural Director of International Relations. Chang Wei nodded, his typically stoic expression softened by genuine admiration. Miss Williams will oversee cultural competency training across our combined 847 hotels in 23 countries. Her work will touch the lives of millions of guests and thousands of employees. But they weren't finished. We're also establishing the Hidden Talent Scholarship Fund, Chang Wei continued, providing educational opportunities for hospitality workers whose potential exceeds their current positions. The first recipient will be Keisha's younger sister, Destiny, who will be studying international business at Columbia University. Keisha felt her knees weaken. Her sister's college dreams, which had seemed impossible on a custodial worker's salary, were suddenly within reach. The symbolic moment came when James Crawford, the Grandview's general manager, approached the podium carrying a small velvet box. "Keisha," he said, his voice carrying years of regret, "on behalf of the Grandview Hotel, I want to present you with something that should have been yours from the beginning." He opened the box to reveal a golden name tag. Keisha Williams, Director of Cultural Relations. But as he handed it to her, Keisha noticed something else in the box. Her old custodial name tag, the one that had labeled her simply as maintenance staff, now sat beside the new one. "We're framing both tags in our lobby," James explained, "not to shame our past mistakes, but to remind every guest and every employee that talent has no uniform, potential has no prerequisites, and dignity belongs to every person who walks through our doors." The tears came then, and they weren't just Keisha's. Li Wei wept for the young woman she'd once been, too afraid to trust her own voice. Margaret cried for all the opportunities her prejudices had cost, not just for Keisha, but for countless others. David Chen's tears carried the relief of someone who'd chosen correctly when it mattered most. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Keisha looked toward the back of the ballroom and saw her mother, Claudette, wearing the dress they'd bought together for this night. Beside her sat Keisha's grandmother, flown in from Jamaica for the occasion. Her grandmother stood slowly, her weathered hands gripping her walker, and began to clap. The same woman who'd told an 8-year-old girl that language is power was witnessing that prophecy fulfilled. As if responding to some unspoken signal, the entire ballroom rose for a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. The sound was deafening, but what moved Keisha most was what she saw in people's faces. She saw recognition. Not just of her achievement, but of possibilities they'd never considered. She saw hotel executives already mentally cataloging their own invisible employees. She saw housekeepers and maintenance workers realizing their dreams might not be as impossible as they'd believed. The award ceremony became a catalyst for industry-wide change. Within 48 hours, major hotel chains announced similar talent recognition programs. Harvard Business School called to request Keisha as a guest lecturer. The United Nations reached out about consulting opportunities, but the moment that would stay with her forever came as the ceremony ended. A young black woman approached her, wearing a hotel housekeeping uniform and clutching a community college catalog. "Miss Williams," she said quietly, "I speak 3 languages and I'm studying accounting at night. After watching your speech, I think I'm ready to apply for a front desk position." Keisha handed her a business card, her own card, with her own company logo. "Call me Monday. Let's talk about what's possible." As the young woman walked away, Keisha understood the true power of what had happened. This wasn't just about one person's success story. This was about changing the entire conversation around human potential. The jade bracelet caught the light one more time as she raised her hand to wave goodbye to the crowd. 3 generations of women's dreams, her grandmother's, Li Wei's, and her own, had converged in this moment of recognition. The invisible had become undeniable. 1 year later, Keisha Williams stood in her corner office overlooking Manhattan, but her view had changed in ways that had nothing to do with altitude. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Grandview Hotel across the street, where it all began. The building looked the same, but everything about it had transformed. The Hidden Talent Initiative had identified 47 employees with skills beyond their job descriptions. The hotel's international booking rate had increased by 180%. Guest satisfaction scores had reached record highs. More importantly, the model was spreading. The Global Cultural Bridge program now operates in 12 countries. Hotels from Tokyo to Dubai had implemented similar talent recognition systems. 3 universities offered courses based on Keisha's cultural competency framework. The ripple effect had become a tidal wave. Her phone buzzed with a text from Li Wei, now her business partner and closest friend. "Seoul conference tomorrow? Ready to change another industry?" Keisha smiled, remembering the terrified woman who'd once hidden behind a cleaning cart. That person felt like a stranger now, though the jade bracelet on her wrist reminded her daily of the journey. But the most meaningful change wasn't in boardrooms or balance sheets. It was in the emails that filled her inbox every day. Stories from around the world. A hotel security guard in London who'd become head of international guest relations after revealing his fluency in 7 languages. A housekeeper in Las Vegas whose engineering background had led to a facilities management promotion. A dishwasher in Miami whose law degree from Venezuela was finally being recognized, putting him on track to become the hotel's compliance officer. Each story carried the same thread. Someone had been seen, truly seen, for the first time. Her assistant knocked and entered. "Ms. Williams, your 3 p.m. is here. The documentary crew from Netflix." Keisha nodded. The filmmakers were creating a series about hidden potential in the workplace. Her story would be the premiere episode, but she'd insisted the series focus on the broader movement rather than just her personal journey. As she prepared for the interview, her mind drifted to a conversation she'd had the week before with her sister Destiny, now thriving at Columbia University. "You know what I realized?" Destiny had said during their weekly call. "You didn't just change your life. You changed how the world sees people like us. You proved that talent doesn't need permission." That phrase stuck with her. Talent doesn't need permission. But it did need recognition. It needed an opportunity. It needed someone willing to look beyond uniforms and job titles to see the human being underneath. The documentary interview went smoothly, but as the crew packed up their equipment, the director asked one final question that would become the series' closing line. What would you say to someone watching this who feels invisible in their own workplace? Keisha paused, thinking of her grandmother's words, of Li Wei's courage, of Margaret Thornfield's transformation, of every person who'd ever felt overlooked or underestimated. I'd say this: you are not invisible. You are not defined by what others see on the surface. Every skill you've learned, every language you speak, every dream you carry, those are real assets with real value. The world needs what you have to offer, even if the world doesn't know it yet. She leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera, knowing her words would reach millions of viewers. Look around you tomorrow. Really look. The person cleaning your office might be a brilliant teacher. The security guard might be fluent in languages you've never heard of. The server at your restaurant might have ideas that could revolutionize your business. But here's the thing. You won't discover any of this unless you start conversations instead of making assumptions. The camera stopped rolling, but Keisha wasn't finished. To everyone watching who feels unseen, your moment is coming. Keep learning, keep growing, keep believing in your own worth. And to everyone in positions of power, open your eyes. The next breakthrough in your organization might be wearing a uniform you've trained yourself not to notice. That evening, Keisha returned to her old neighborhood in Brooklyn. She visited her mother, now retired and healthy thanks to the health insurance from Keisha's new position. She stopped by Ahmed's corner store, where he still corrected her Arabic pronunciation, though now it was more friendship than lesson. And she ended her day at the community center where she'd started her language learning journey, teaching a free class called Professional Communication for Multilingual Workers. The room was full. Housekeepers, maintenance workers, food service employees, all learning how to present their hidden skills in professional settings. As she looked around the room, Keisha saw herself in every face. She saw Li Wei's courage, her grandmother's wisdom, and most importantly, she saw unlimited potential waiting to be recognized. The invisible had become inevitable. Because when talent finally gets the recognition it deserves, it doesn't just change one life. It changes everything. Your turn to make a difference starts right now. Think about someone in your life who might be overlooked. A coworker, a service worker, someone whose potential others don't see. Tomorrow, start a conversation. Ask about their background, their skills, their dreams. You might discover the next Keisha Williams. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their hidden talents matter. Drop a comment telling us about a time you discovered someone's unexpected abilities, or when someone finally recognized yours. And subscribe to Black Voices Uncut for more stories that prove human potential has no limits. Because every week we're uncovering the extraordinary people hiding in plain sight. Remember, talent doesn't wear a uniform, but recognition should.